The tension in the military base had been building for weeks. Captain Marcus Rivera walked through the dimly lit corridors with heavy steps, his jaw clenched tight with frustration. The recent mission failures had put everyone on edge, and the pressure from higher command was suffocating. His unit had been working around the clock, but nothing seemed to go right. As he turned the corner near the restricted wing, he noticed a figure in civilian clothes walking where they shouldn't be. The person wore a dark hoodie and moved with suspicious stealth through the shadows. Marcus felt his anger spike. After everything his team had been through, some unauthorized person was wandering through their secure facility. Without thinking, his military training kicked in. He moved swiftly and silently, closing the distance between them. His hand shot out, grabbing the intruder by the shoulder and spinning them around. In one fluid motion, he pressed them firmly against the concrete wall, his forearm across their chest. "What the hell do you think you're doing in this sector?" Marcus growled, his voice low and threatening. The corridor was poorly lit, casting long shadows that obscured the person's face. All he could see was the outline of someone much smaller than him, breathing heavily under his grip. The figure struggled slightly, but Marcus held firm. His adrenaline was pumping, and months of frustration were boiling over. Security breaches were the last thing they needed right now. His unit's reputation was already hanging by a thread, and he wasn't about to let some civilian wanderer make things worse. "I asked you a question," he pressed, leaning closer. "This is a restricted area. How did you even get past security?" His voice echoed off the narrow walls, and he could feel the person's rapid heartbeat against his arm. The intruder remained silent, which only fueled his anger more. Marcus had seen too many good soldiers suffer because of intelligence leaks and security failures. He wasn't going to let this slide, not tonight, not after everything they'd been through. "Answer me or I'm calling security right now," he threatened, his grip tightening slightly. The person was still breathing hard and he could sense their fear, but something felt off. There was something familiar about their posture, something that nagged at the back of his mind. But his anger was too strong to listen to that small voice of doubt. All he could think about was protecting his unit and maintaining the security of their operations. Whoever this person was, they had made a serious mistake by being here tonight. The shadows danced around them as they stood locked in this tense confrontation, neither of them speaking. Marcus waited for an answer, his patience wearing thin with each passing second. Little did he know that this moment would change everything he thought he knew about his military career and the chain of command he served under. The silence stretched between them for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could feel his heart pounding as he waited for some kind of response from the person pinned against the wall. Then slowly, a familiar voice cut through the darkness. "Captain Rivera, I suggest you remove your hands from me immediately." The voice was calm, controlled, and unmistakably female. But more than that, it was a voice he had heard countless times in briefings over radio communications and in his nightmares about failed missions. His blood ran cold as recognition dawned on him. "That voice," he whispered, his grip loosening slightly. His eyes struggled to adjust to the dim lighting, trying to make out the features of the person he had cornered. "Yes, Captain, that voice." The tone was steady but carried an undertone of authority that made his spine straighten automatically. "Now step back and turn on the lights." Marcus felt his world tilting off its axis. His hands trembled as he slowly released his hold and stepped backward. With shaking fingers, he fumbled for the light switch on the wall behind him. The fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, flooding the corridor with harsh white light. Standing before him, adjusting her civilian hoodie with composed dignity, was Admiral Sarah Chen. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and she wore no makeup or uniform insignia. But there was no mistaking those sharp, intelligent eyes that had stared down enemy generals and government officials alike. Marcus felt like the ground had opened up beneath his feet. Admiral Chen was not just any commanding officer. She was the admiral, the youngest person to ever achieve that rank, the strategic genius who had revolutionized modern military tactics, and most importantly, his ultimate superior. Every soldier in their branch knew her reputation, even if few had seen her in person. "Admiral," he breathed, his face draining of all color. His hands dropped to his sides as if they weighed 1,000 pounds each. The full magnitude of what he had just done crashed over him like a tidal wave. She stood there calmly, brushing off her jacket and straightening her clothes. There was no anger in her expression, just a calculating look that somehow made everything worse. Marcus had heard stories about Admiral Chen's legendary composure under pressure, but experiencing it firsthand was terrifying. I had no idea, he stammered, his mind racing to find words that could possibly explain or excuse what had just happened. You were in civilian clothes in a restricted area, I thought. You thought what exactly? She asked, her voice still eerily calm. That you had the authority to physically assault someone without identifying yourself, or asking questions first? Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air in the corridor. His military training had taught him to follow protocol, but his anger and frustration had made him abandon everything he had learned about proper procedure. Ma'am, I can explain, he began, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. What explanation could possibly justify what he had done? He had just manhandled the highest-ranking officer in their entire command structure. Admiral Chen studied Marcus for a long moment, her expression unreadable. The silence in the corridor was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of the base's ventilation system. Marcus stood at rigid attention, waiting for the hammer to fall on his military career. At ease, Captain, she said finally, and Marcus relaxed slightly, though tension still coiled through every muscle in his body. Walk with me. She began moving down the corridor, and Marcus fell into step beside her, maintaining the proper distance for a subordinate officer. His mind was spinning with questions, but he didn't dare speak without permission. Admiral Chen's reputation for strategic thinking was legendary, and he had no idea what she was planning. Tell me, Captain Rivera, what do you know about Operation Silent Storm? She asked as they walked, her voice echoing softly off the walls. Marcus frowned, trying to remember any briefings about an operation by that name. I'm not familiar with that operation, ma'am, he admitted, wondering if this was some kind of test. Of course you're not. It's classified at levels far above your clearance, she replied matter-of-factly. But your recent mission failures have caught the attention of some very important people in Washington. His heart sank even further. If his unit's problems had reached the highest levels of government, things were even worse than he had imagined. Ma'am, my team has been working around the clock to improve our performance. We've analyzed every failed mission and implemented new training protocols. Admiral Chen stopped walking and turned to face him. Captain, do you think your team's failures are really failures? The question caught him off guard. Ma'am, I don't understand. What if I told you that every mission your unit has been assigned in the past 6 months was designed to fail? She asked, her eyes never leaving his face. What if I told you that your failures have been providing valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and response patterns? Marcus felt his world shifting again. Are you saying we've been used as decoys? I'm saying that sometimes the most valuable intelligence comes from observing how the enemy responds to perceived weaknesses. Admiral Chen replied. Your unit has been unknowingly participating in a larger strategic operation. She resumed walking, and Marcus followed, his mind reeling from this revelation. But my soldiers, they think they're failing. Their morale is completely destroyed, which makes their performances more believable to enemy observers, the Admiral said. Sometimes the greatest service a soldier can provide is to appear incompetent while actually gathering crucial intelligence. They reached a secure door that Marcus had never seen opened. Admiral Chen placed her hand on a scanner, and the door slid open silently. Beyond it lay a corridor he had never known existed, filled with banks of computer monitors and communication equipment. This is why I was in that corridor tonight. Captain, she explained as they entered the hidden facility. I've been overseeing Operation Silent Storm from this command center. Your encounter with me was not exactly planned. Marcus looked around in amazement at the sophisticated equipment surrounding them. Officers he didn't recognize worked quietly at various stations, monitoring communications and analyzing data streams that appeared to be coming from around the world. Admiral Chen led Marcus to a large screen displaying what appeared to be a world map, dotted with blinking lights and data streams. The complexity of the operation spread before him was staggering. He had thought his unit was just struggling with basic missions, but now he could see they were a small part of something much larger. Every time your unit engaged the enemy and appeared to retreat in confusion, our satellites were recording their response patterns, Admiral Chen explained, pointing to different sections of the display. Every piece of equipment they deployed, every communication protocol they used, every tactical decision they made. Marcus stared at the screen, beginning to understand the scope of what had been happening. So when we failed to secure the compound in Syria last month, you provided us with detailed intelligence about their rapid response capabilities and showed us weaknesses in their perimeter defense that we never would have discovered otherwise, she finished. That information has already been used to plan 3 successful operations by other units. The weight of this revelation was overwhelming. For months, Marcus had been carrying the burden of failure, watching his soldiers struggle with their perceived incompetence, all while they were actually contributing to successful intelligence-gathering operations. But why wasn't I told? He asked, the question burning in his mind. My team could have performed better if they knew the real objectives. Admiral Chen turned to face him directly. Because genuine emotional responses cannot be faked, Captain. If your soldiers had known they were supposed to fail, their reactions would have been different. The enemy would have noticed. Real frustration, real disappointment, real anger make for convincing performances. She gestured to a nearby chair, and Marcus sat down heavily as the full implications hit him. Your reaction tonight, for example, she continued. That anger you felt, that frustration that drove you to confront what you thought was a security breach, that came from months of genuine concern for your unit's reputation. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anger building inside him. Relief that his team hadn't actually been failing, but anger that they had been kept in the dark about their real mission. How many of my soldiers have requested transfers because they thought they were incompetent? He asked. 7 have submitted requests, Admiral Chen replied without hesitation, all of which have been delayed pending the completion of Operation Silent Storm. In 2 weeks, your unit will receive new orders that will allow them to demonstrate their true capabilities. She walked over to another console and pulled up what appeared to be personnel files. Every member of your unit was specifically selected for this operation, Captain. We needed soldiers with genuine tactical skills who would react authentically to perceived failure. Your team's psychological profiles indicated they had the resilience to handle temporary setbacks while maintaining their core competencies. Marcus looked at the files, displaying his soldiers' faces and service records. These were good people who had been suffering because they didn't understand their real purpose. What happens when this operation ends? He asked. That depends partly on how you handle what you've learned tonight, Admiral Chen said, her tone becoming more serious. You now know classified information that could compromise ongoing operations if mishandled. The Admiral moved to stand directly in front of him. I'm going to ask something unusual of you, Captain. I want you to continue leading your unit as if this conversation never happened. For 2 more weeks, they need to maintain their current emotional state. Marcus felt the weight of this request. She was asking him to continue watching his soldiers suffer, knowing it was unnecessary, for the sake of an operation they didn't even know they were part of. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood with his unit on the transport aircraft, watching his soldiers prepare for what they believed was another routine mission. The irony wasn't lost on him that they were more prepared than they had ever been, despite their recent struggles with confidence. Captain, are you sure about the intelligence on this one? Sergeant Williams asked, adjusting his communication equipment. After our recent track record, I want to make sure we're not walking into another disaster. Marcus felt the familiar pang of guilt, but also a surge of anticipation. Trust your training, Williams. Today's going to be different. As the aircraft approached the target zone, Marcus received a coded message on his secure communicator. The enemy had taken the bait exactly as Admiral Chen had predicted. They were moving into position, believing they were about to ambush a vulnerable unit. Listen up, Marcus announced to his team. I want everyone to remember that sometimes success comes from patience and persistence. Today, all your training and experience are going to pay off. Lieutenant Thompson looked up from her tactical display. Sir, are you feeling all right? You seem different today. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he'd had in weeks. I'm feeling optimistic, Thompson. I have a good feeling about this mission. When they landed, everything unfolded exactly as Admiral Chen had described. The enemy forces moved into position, expecting to face the same confused and ineffective unit they had been observing for months. Instead, they encountered Marcus's team at peak performance. Williams intercepted enemy communications with precision that bordered on artistic. Thompson led her assault team with tactical brilliance that left the enemy completely outmaneuvered. Hayes secured critical evidence with methodical efficiency that would later lead to arrests across 3 continents. Within 6 hours, The entire enemy cell was captured or eliminated, their plans disrupted and their network exposed. As Marcus watched his soldiers celebrating their overwhelming success, he felt a complex mixture of pride and guilt. 3 days later, Admiral Chen arrived at their base for what was officially described as a routine inspection. Marcus's unit was assembled in their briefing room, still glowing from their recent victory. "Soldiers," Admiral Chen began, "what you accomplished last week was extraordinary, but I'm here today to tell you that your service to your country began long before that mission." She spent the next hour explaining Operation Silent Storm, revealing how every perceived failure had contributed to intelligence gathering and strategic positioning. Marcus watched his soldiers' faces as they processed the information, seeing confusion give way to understanding and disappointment transform into pride. Every frustrating mission, every tactical setback, every moment you questioned your abilities was serving a vital purpose, Admiral Chen continued. "You were chosen for this operation not despite your skills, but because of them." Sergeant Williams was the first to speak. "Ma'am, does this mean Captain Rivera knew about this the whole time?" Marcus felt his breath catch as all eyes turned to him. Admiral Chen nodded. "Captain Rivera learned about Operation Silent Storm by accident 2 weeks ago. I asked him to maintain operational security, knowing it would be one of the most difficult orders he would ever follow." The room fell silent as his soldiers processed this information. Marcus waited, unsure how they would react to learning he had known the truth while watching them suffer. Finally, Lieutenant Thompson stood up. "Sir, that must have been hell, watching us struggle while knowing we were actually succeeding." Corporal Hayes nodded in agreement. "I can't imagine having to keep that secret while seeing how frustrated we all were." One by one, his soldiers expressed not anger, but understanding and respect for the position he had been placed in. They recognized that his decision to follow orders had protected an operation that ultimately saved lives. The bond between a unit that has shared both apparent failure and genuine success is unbreakable, Admiral Chen observed as she prepared to leave. "You are now one of the most effective teams in our entire command structure." As Marcus watched Admiral Chen depart, he reflected on the events that had begun with his mistaken confrontation in a darkened corridor. A moment of poor judgment had led to revelations that changed his understanding of leadership, sacrifice, and the complex nature of military service. His unit had emerged stronger, their success built on a foundation of genuine struggle and ultimate vindication. They had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come from enduring apparent defeats, and that true leadership sometimes requires bearing knowledge that cannot be shared until the time is right. Marcus stood in silence for several minutes, absorbing everything Admiral Chen had revealed. The moral complexity of the situation was overwhelming. As a leader, his instinct was to protect and support his soldiers, but now he understood that their protection came from maintaining their ignorance of the larger picture. "I need to ask you something, Admiral," Marcus said finally. "When this operation ends and my soldiers learn the truth, how do I explain that I knew and said nothing? How do I maintain their trust when they realize I watched them suffer unnecessarily?" Admiral Chen considered his question carefully. "That's a risk I'm asking you to take, Captain. Leadership sometimes requires making decisions that seem wrong in the moment, but serve a greater purpose. Your soldiers will either understand that you were following orders and protecting a vital operation, or they won't." She walked over to a nearby chair and sat down, her formal military bearing relaxing slightly. "I won't lie to you about the personal cost. Some of your soldiers may never fully trust you again. Others will respect that you made a difficult choice for the greater good. This is the burden of command at higher levels." Marcus thought about each member of his team. Williams, with his dry sense of humor that had been disappearing over the past weeks. Thompson, whose tactical brilliance was being overshadowed by self-doubt. Hayes, whose family was already questioning his career choice. "What if one of them does something irreversible before the operation ends?" Marcus asked. "What if Hayes actually resigns or Williams has a breakdown? Their psychological profiles might say they can handle this, but profiles aren't perfect." "Then we adapt," Admiral Chen replied. "But consider this, Captain. In 2 weeks, your unit will be assigned to what appears to be another routine mission. Instead, they'll find themselves in the middle of the most successful counterterrorism operation of their careers. They'll see their tactical skills being used to save lives and capture high-value targets." She stood up and moved to another display, showing detailed dossiers of enemy operatives. "Every member of your team will play a crucial role in that success. Williams will use his expertise in communications intercept. Thompson will lead a tactical assault that neutralizes their leadership. Hayes will be responsible for securing evidence that will lead to the arrest of their financial supporters. Marcus felt a spark of hope as he imagined his soldiers finally being able to demonstrate their true capabilities, and they'll understand then that their previous mission served a purpose. More than that, Admiral Chen said, they'll understand that they were chosen for this operation specifically because of their skills and character. The psychological stress they've endured will make their eventual success even more meaningful. She returned to the main display showing the global intelligence network. Captain, I need your decision. Can you carry this secret for 14 more days? Can you trust that your soldiers are strong enough to handle 2 more weeks of apparent failure before they experience unprecedented success? Marcus looked around the command center one more time, seeing the scope of the operation his unit was part of. He thought about the terrorist attacks that had been prevented, the lives that had been saved, and the potential to dismantle an entire criminal network. I have one condition, he said finally. If any of my soldiers show signs of genuine psychological distress that could lead to permanent harm, I want permission to intervene, even if it compromises the operation. Admiral Chen nodded. Agreed. If you believe any soldier is at risk of genuine harm, you have authorization to provide support within the constraints of operational security. Marcus straightened to attention. Then yes, ma'am. I'll maintain operational security for the remainder of Operation Silent Storm. Thank you, Captain, she said. Your decision today may prevent more casualties than any single battle your unit could win. Marcus stared at Admiral Chen, feeling the enormous weight of the decision she was placing before him. The hidden command center hummed with activity around them, but all he could think about were the faces of his soldiers. Sergeant Williams, who had stopped sleeping properly after their last mission, Lieutenant Thompson, who had been questioning every tactical decision, Corporal Hayes, who had been talking about leaving the military altogether. Ma'am, with respect, asking me to watch my team suffer for 2 more weeks when I know the truth feels impossible, Marcus said carefully. These are good soldiers who deserve better. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. I understand your position, Captain, but let me show you something that might help you appreciate the stakes involved. She led him to another section of the command center, where a massive display showed real-time intelligence feeds from around the globe. The screen was divided into multiple sections, each showing different operations in progress. The intelligence your unit has gathered has already prevented 3 terrorist attacks, she said, pointing to different feeds. Here in London, here in Berlin, and here in Tokyo. The enemy response patterns you helped us identify allowed other units to intercept weapons shipments and communication networks. Marcus watched the feeds showing successful operations, raids on terrorist cells, and weapons caches being secured. The scope of what his unit's sacrifices had enabled was staggering. Furthermore, Admiral Chen continued, the final phase of Operation Silent Storm depends on the enemy believing your unit is still vulnerable. In 1 week, they're planning to target what they think is an easy mark. When they do, we'll be ready with a response that will cripple their entire regional network. She pulled up a detailed tactical display showing enemy positions and planned movements. If they suspect your unit's failures were deliberate, they'll change their plans. Months of work will be lost, and we'll miss our chance to eliminate a major threat. Marcus studied the information before him. The enemy had indeed been planning something significant, and they were using his unit's perceived weakness as part of their strategy. How do you know they'll target us? Because they've been monitoring your unit's communications and mission reports, Admiral Chen explained. Our counterintelligence teams have been feeding them carefully crafted information that makes your unit appeared to be the perfect target for their next operation. The Admiral moved to a secure terminal and entered a series of codes. I'm going to show you something that requires the highest security clearance, she said, the real scope of what we're dealing with. The screen displayed a network diagram that sprawled across multiple countries. Marcus could see connections between terrorist cells, weapons suppliers, and financial networks that formed a web of international criminal activity. This organization has been responsible for 14 major attacks in the past 2 years, Admiral Chen said. They've been growing stronger and more sophisticated. Operation Silent Storm represents our best opportunity to strike at their leadership and dismantle their entire structure. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. His unit's suffering wasn't just about intelligence gathering. It was about preventing future attacks that could kill hundreds or thousands of innocent people. "Your soldiers are heroes, Captain," Admiral Chen said quietly. "They just don't know it yet. In 2 weeks, when this operation concludes successfully, they'll understand the true value of their service. They'll know that their apparent failures saved lives." She turned to face him directly. "The question is whether you can carry this burden for 14 more days. Can you look at your soldiers' disappointment and frustration, knowing that their temporary suffering is preventing much greater suffering elsewhere?"